Hi, you guys, it's Corey, and before we do anything else, I want to thank my friend Jay for making the thumbnail art. Jay, if you're watching this, I just really want to thank you for taking the time to make that. And if you're watching this, I hope you find an outlet to play pool on. He's also very sick at pool. Thank you guys so much. That's all I had to say, and here's the video. Hey there, everyone, it's Corey. If you may have noticed, things are a little bit different on the channel today. The energy is a little less assertive, some might say a little less obnoxious than it has been in the past couple videos. There's some relaxing sounds in the background. The lighting's changed ever so slightly. We're hanging out in a socially distant, safe environment where we can express our thoughts safely and without judgment. And I'm just here to say a few words, and sometimes words can have meaning, but they don't always have to. I'm going to say those words in 3, 2, 1. The Nun isn't as bad of a movie as everyone says it is. In 17th century France, King Louis XIII ordered the walls around the small town of Loudun to be demolished. This order created a point of tension between the Protestants living in the area, who wanted the walls to remain, and the Catholics who wanted to support the crown's wishes. Now, I'm not a resident of France in the 1600s, but it's safe to say the wall feud was fueled by an undercurrent of centuries-old religious tension between Catholics and Protestants. Loudun was populated by nobility. At the core of the town was a convent of nuns devoted to the order of St. Ursula, the philanthropist, a noblewoman who forfeited her wealth and social status to dedicate her life to prayer. The Ursuline convent in Loudun was only 6 years old by this time, consisting of 18 nuns at the average age of 25, almost all of whom were the daughters of the town's most affluent families. 2 years after the crown announced interest in removing the walls of Loudun, the plague broke out. The town was placed under quarantine, with most members of the wealth evacuating the town, leaving their daughters, the Ursuline nuns, to fend for themselves. However, the nuns were not alone. In the spring of 1634, a few short months into the quarantine, word was sent out to the archbishop from the prioress of the convent. In the notice, the church received reports of nuns levitating in their sleep, hearing the laughter and cries of children late into the night, and sightings of strange men walking the stairs and standing in their bedroom doorways. A priest was sent into Loudun to investigate these disturbing reports. What he found shook him to the core and transformed the small French village and the nuns quarantined there forever. When the priest opened the doors of the convent, he was immediately engulfed in darkness. The air was filled by the sounds of what he assumed or hoped to be the nuns, howling, barking, and chanting in dialects he couldn't make out. Fearing something far worse than a plague had gotten into the convent, the priest clenched his cross and asked in Latin, "Who goes there?" His request was met with sinister laughter and more screeching and barking. From somewhere at the other end of the pitch-dark corridor, a low voice answered in Latin, a language the nuns were never taught, "Enemies of God." When he heard this answer, the priest asked again, in Latin, who allowed the entity to cross into the convent. The voice replied with a name, Urbain Grandier. Following this response, a piece of paper slid across the stone floor and stopped at the feet of the priest. It was a contract, scribed and sealed by the devil himself and signed by the man that the nuns had named. Urbain Grandier, the name mentioned by the demons who possessed the Loudun Ursulines, was a priest who lived with them. He notably visited Loudun's plague patients, donated money to the poor, and equally notably kept the nuns company and was known throughout the town to be a ladies' man.
Beata Maria, you know I am a righteous man.
The priest conducting the investigation on the convent, along with Cardinal Richelieu and the authority of the archbishop, immediately put Grandier on trial for witchcraft and use of magic. The possessed nuns themselves were brought to trial as witnesses and not suspects. All 18 of them testified against Grandier. During the trial, all nuns exhibited behaviors and feats of their demonic possessions. The prioress of the convent was able to grow to a reported 7 feet tall, looming over the trial audience before eventually shrinking back to her natural size. Other nuns would speak languages they had never learned. All of this, on top of the contract and signature, led to an immediate death sentence verdict for Grandier. He was tortured with a device known as the boot, and more than likely subjected to numerous other methods of torture. Grandier's last request was to be hanged before his burning as a final act of mercy. However, the executioner lit the funeral pyre before pulling the hangman's lever, burning Grandier alive. Shortly after Father Grandier's death, the prioress was granted a pilgrimage to holy sites throughout France, culminating in a visit with Louis XIII himself. Upon this visit, it was reported that the demons were finally expelled from the nuns. Historians have proposed several theories seeking insight into what led to Urbain Grandier's fate, and who, if anyone, had the greater motive to condemn him. Some say the priest investigator who first discovered the possessed nuns was outraged at Grandier's behavior and suggested his name to free the nuns from abuse. Others say the nuns were acting in self-interest and didn't want to catch the plague, living with someone who routinely visited the sick and dying. Honestly, what reason did they not have? I mean, these are a group of 20-somethings in quarantine who had been raised with access to cozy beds, hot food, and above all, the opportunity to leave the town during an evacuation, which they didn't see coming. Not to offend any members of any faith out there, but if I knew the town I lived in was about to be infected with the plague, I doubt I would want to stay there in an abbey. Demonic possession is a pretty convincing and effective way out of that situation without having to renounce your faith and disappoint the church or your community. The Loudun Ursulines were able to use the loophole of possession to escape the plague, and for better or worse, whether they knew the outcome it would lead to or not, they were willing to put Urbain Grandier's life on the line to do it. And I, for one, don't know if I wouldn't do the same in their shoes. Somehow, nearly 400 years later, history has forgotten all about the intrigue and mystery that Loudun, France had been shrouded in, but it has held on to one thing, and that is that possession sold then, and it sells now. Regardless of how or why, the image of a 7-foot-tall nun looming over someone instantly sends chills down my spine. It's scary as hell to think about, and for movie studios, it's a damn good way to make money. For hundreds of years, demonic possession has been an international attention-grabbing topic, and it sure isn't stopping now, and that isn't a bad thing. Possession and exorcism movies, just like slasher movies, creature features, or ghost stories, are a distraction from our real problems. In the 1600s, the last thing anyone wanted to talk about was being under quarantine. The story of nuns being possessed spread like wildfire because it was a threat you could relate to, but didn't have to directly face. And those problems that affected Europe during the plague aren't entirely different from the quarantine affecting us today. Nearly 4 centuries later, the nun wasn't intended to have any direct correlation to the events in Loudun in the 1630s, but it does tap into our deep fears of, and our obsession with, the supernatural. While it isn't a masterpiece, it's a story that keeps the theme of demonic possession enduring from the 17th century to today, carrying lessons and reflections with it. As time progresses, who knows how, when, or if the tradition will carry on. The Nun is a project where you have a team of people that are united in an effort to make a terrible script into an awesome traditional horror film, or at least something spooky, or at even more least, something you can take your girlfriend on a date to, or at the extreme least, a cool thing to have in the background of a party. But that does not mean that you can say that it's a terrible failure of a movie, because it does so many things right. It has atmosphere down to a T. It has costumes that just rule. It has a really excellent villain. That's the whole point of the film, is that the nun is really cool and scares the crap out of me. The nun is just such a scary concept of a villain. I can only blame Warner Brothers so much for wanting to make money off of the nun, because it's a way cooler character than Annabelle. I haven't seen Annabelle movies at all. I never will. I went and saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood in a drive-in theater, and the screen to my left was playing Annabelle Creation or Annabelle Rejuvenation, Annabelle Hibernation, or whatever. The screen behind me was playing the new Lion King movie, and I was watching Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. That was the one time in my life where I knew I'd made the best choice. There's a terrifying soundtrack. Whoever scored this was having the time of their life. All of that comes together to cancel out the fact that this nun wannabe is walking around in an empty abbey looking for a dude that's a preacher, just following a script that has no idea where it's going. In the darkness of this bad script, you could tell that a team of awesome people and an incredible cast teamed up to pick a very good traditional horror atmosphere. That's very reminiscent of the old Universal horror movies. I'm thinking Wolfman. I'm also thinking of like the opening scene of Night of the Living Dead. Those two iconic like cemetery graveyard chase scenes. They threw those influences in there. They threw Exorcist influences in there. Creepy Nuns is cool, and it hadn't happened before in movies really. Maybe like a little bit of Black Sunday. There's some religious stuff in Black Sunday. It happens, but it usually happens in foreign films, and they make this take place in like Romania to throw in some like European weirdness. This monastery or this convent is flooded with creepiness. Every corner, every nook, and every cranny is like spooky. Tessa Farmiga is surprisingly Vera Farmiga's little sister and not her daughter, which I thought before I did any research, is like running around scared and like seeing things, and it plays a lot with the lights and the shadows of this abbey. It's beautifully done. If the whole movie had been like that, it wouldn't, horror movies don't win awards, but it would have been a lot better received than if it just had the jump scares and the very lame, predictable beginning, middle, end Warner Brothers like formula. I'm just gonna say it. The set is so much fun. The cemetery is so cool. I would have given anything to be able to just shred.
City air chokes me today more than it ever has before. I'm nervous to feel deserved by these street signs anymore. Are you going to be waiting up when I get home? We'll stay up all night.
In that cemetery set, it's the perfect like Tony Hawk Pro Skater level. I can't imagine what it would have been like to been one of the guys who just opens up the sound stage early in the morning or late at night, and like with all the lights off. Everything is illusory and atmospheric and almost like a fever dream for the first half of the movie, and they've like really ride that narrow, blurry line between camp and devoted horror seriousness. It's very cool to watch. You can have a sick film without a good script. If there's an aspect of your film that isn't strong, it does not mean that your whole movie is garbage. It doesn't mean that your movie like collects dust. You can still like have fun with this movie. You can still enjoy it for what it is. You can blast the soundtrack at any Halloween party. You'll probably scare half the people there out of the place. Whoever scored this thing is a genius. And you can have fun with it. You can have fun with a bunch of nuns being scared of a bad nun, an evil nun, a demon. It's like you can enjoy things. You can let yourself enjoy things. And there's a lot to be enjoyed in this movie. If having a set that you want to skateboard in makes a terrible movie, then this movie's the worst of them all. There's a really cool silhouetted shot of this like boy with like a snake crawling out of his mouth. It's completely backlit, so it looks like almost animated. It's so clean and so cool. There's so many moments like that in this movie. I was thinking of a reason to really like, why would I want to make this video? What sets The Nun apart from other movies if it's not terrible, but it's also not spectacular? Are there any favorite moments of mine? And there are. Some of the best long tracking following shots ever in this movie. I highly recommend you take the time now that we're all stuck together to stuck alone together. Give this a shot. Or if you have and you didn't like it, then that's fine. Pop it in, check it out. It's on some streaming services. I promise you it will not be like an hour and a half of raw suffering. I would not put you guys through that. I just think it deserves more credit than none at all, which is what it got. Speaking of movies that didn't get any credit, if you have a movie recommendation for me, feel free to throw it in the comments. Please let me know what you think about this video and what you'd like to maybe see in future videos. Thank you guys very much for checking this out, and I hope to see you again at the Dead Picture Society.